Looking for financial support that strives to honor your community's rich heritage and cultural practices? Introducing RBC Origins. Our Indigenous banking specialists provide resources and advice that can help transform your ideas into tangible progress and community prosperity. At RBC, we're committed to driving your goals forward. Learn more at rbc.com/Indigenous. RBC, ideas happen here.
I'm Cierra Bettens. Welcome to APTN News InFocus. On this week's episode, how do we fight the wildfires of today and tomorrow? For the past couple of years, the summer breeze across Canada has been tainted by the smell of smoke. Thousands of evacuees have fled to hotels and congregate shelters due to wildfires. It's one of the worst fire seasons in 30 years. Experts warn as climate change accelerates, the fire season is expected to become longer, larger, and more destructive in years to come. Alex McDougall is a Grand Chief of Anisininew, Okimawin, which represents the 4 Island Lake First Nations in northern Manitoba. For the 4 communities, 2025 has been a summer of evacuations, loss, and displacement, as wildfires force band members to leave their homes. McDougall and other chiefs are calling on Canada to develop a national fire strategy that brings Indigenous leaders to the table.
Experts confirm that investing in prevention saves money. Public Safety Canada acknowledges that $1 invested in prevention saves $6 in response costs. Yet Ottawa refuses to follow its own math.
He joins us to discuss the community impact of the fires and why he and other chiefs are urging Canada to shift its focus from wildfire response and recovery to prevention and preparedness. Thank you so much for joining us, Grand Chief McDougall.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with a question. I was wondering if you could just describe the situation that the communities you represent are in this summer due to wildfires. What does it look like on the front lines?
This summer, as we've seen across the province and in Canada, for that matter, we've seen a lot of forest fires that have affected our communities and have required some, for our case, all of our communities to evacuate due to smoke and fire threatening our communities. Some of our leadership, knowing that there were already communities in large urban centers like Brandon and Winnipeg, knew that there would be issues with accommodations and only evacuated their P1 list, the ones that are most vulnerable, our elderly and our young, to be evacuated to large urban centers. This particular summer, it's been very challenging and very stressful for all of our communities, where one community, Garden Hill, had to completely evacuate, where their community was actually surrounded by fire and forced out. As a result, we were fortunate that they were able to protect their homes, protect the winter road supplies that were brought in, such as your gas and your lumber. Those are hauled in over the winter road, and if they were lost to the fire, it would have been a big cost for all involved in the continuing development of that community. So it's been traumatic. We are beginning the process of repatriation. Wasagamak has returned home without incident, and St. Therese continue to return home as well. Garden Hill started yesterday with their repatriation, and I know that there's definitely relief that the announcement was made that they were cleared to return. So I'm very grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. And so, throughout this summer, what are some of the challenges that First Nation leaders and community members that are impacted by these wildfires faced?
Well, one of the clear gaps or lack of resources that we learned through this summer's fire evacuation, that there's no specific resources in our area. I had thought, I didn't even know this myself, that the conservation office that was responsible for monitoring fires and responding to those fires apparently closed at Stevenson Island, which is uh, in the area of Garden Hill, adjacent to Garden Hill. And I was quite surprised and taken aback that there was no resources here where it most needed to quickly identify and respond to those fires, and that resource was taken away for whatever reason, most likely budget cuts, and that continued policy of government watching and waiting to see what happens with these fires is something that's been mentioned many times by our leadership, and we've um, tried to communicate that concern and to government, and hopefully we'll see a response to that.
Hmm. And so you and other chiefs are now calling for a national Indigenous fire strategy. And I was wondering, could you kind of describe what that means and what that could look like?
That stems from what we learned here personally with our communities, and the policies that are currently in place by government. We'd like to know where their priorities are, and if they are removing assets from these fire-prone areas. That's an indication that they're not holding our communities that are in these remote, isolated areas that are in fire-prone areas not being a priority. So we need to find a way and a mechanism that our communities in Manitoba and across Canada can be involved with governments in planning for action and fire prevention, protecting our communities. Right now, that doesn't seem to be the priority for our governments. So if we can, we'd like to see, well, we'd prefer to have our own people being provided with the resources, the training to be the people watching for those fires and be the people responding and reacting and putting suppression effort on the fires before it gets out of hand, before it gets to a size where the communities are affected and resulting in evacuations. Is that's another thing that we've discovered, is that Canada spends a lot of money on reacting to fires and evacuations, and very little of actually being proactive and responding to those fires that threaten our communities. So being at the table, being the people at the forefront of the evacuation, the resourcing of personnel and equipment, so that we are the ones in control of it, managing it, and responding to these fires, and not having to wait for Canada or Manitoba to say so. Those should be all in the process of the agreements that we'd like to see in place, allowing us to do that.
So we've done a lot of stories throughout this wildfire season about, some of the challenges of getting firefighting equipment to remote and northern communities. I'm wondering, why do you think it's so challenging to get this equipment? And, are there sort of any bureaucratic hoops that communities are encountering trying to get this equipment?
Well, I think it's just misguided priorities for government, and not seeing our First Nations communities as a contributor to the province and to the rest of the country, which is a completely wrong lens to look at our proud people. We are the original people of this country, and we are able to do things if we're treated with the same level of consideration. Our communities don't get the same level of support, and whether it's financial revenues, programming, we are not considered in the same level as the rest of the country. And it's reflected in capping of our education program, capping with capital so that we're not developing and not being able to grow as a community without a strong economic base. Because all of that is essentially in the hands of government and their policies and their standards. And I think our community and our leadership are saying that's enough. We want to be uh, treated fairly and equitably as Manitobans and Canadians. And Canada and Manitoba through the NRTA benefit from the mass resources that our communities have in their backyards, whether it's mining, forestry, you name it. That's what the community has, and I know it's unfortunate that Canada is going around again without consulting communities, passing Bill C5, and again circumventing numerous acts that protect our environment, that protect our rights, and continuing to push the envelope of eliminating our First Nations communities. I say that referencing the Indian Act. Where in this day and age will you see an act that actually encourages genocide? The Indian Act does that through the Section 6.2.
And, beyond just sending equipment, what are some infrastructure projects in Manitoba, like, say, all-season roads, for example, that can be a part of wildfire prevention and preparedness?
We're actually a very good example of what a remote and isolated community looks like. Our region, the four communities, are only accessible by air and winter road. Those are being challenged with climate change. So our winter road season's getting shorter and shorter. Our summers are now inundated with forest fires constantly, and that's a direct impact of climate change. And there maybe also be some contributing impacts from industry as well. The water levels continue to drop, and it's been the driest season that we've seen here. That's contributing to the forest fires. So one of our communities, Wasagamak, is still without an airport, although the province did commit to supporting the community with an access road and a new airport. So we're hopeful that'll come in for Wasagamak, but the region largely is still isolated without any uh, road infrastructure. So as part of what you would normally see in a larger rural center where you have critical infrastructure with your water and sewer, your roads and your hospitals. Our region here, with a population that's nearing 20,000 people, doesn't even have a hospital. There's no hospital here in Allen Lake. So there's third world conditions that we continue to live in, not by choice, but by design with our governments. And that needs to change.
And so, turning to a bit of a different subject, as Grand Chief, I'm wondering, how have you seen evacuations and, sometimes multiple evacuations this summer impact the mental health of community members?
For me, it's very sad to have to see our young people and our old people, particularly getting shuffled around in congregate shelters where they would otherwise be at home in the safety of their own residence and in their communities. Very disheartening to see the condition that our members are exposed to when they're being evacuated. Understanding that there are challenges with accommodations, But these congregate shelters are no place for anybody to be staying for any length of time. In fact, we tried to hold our press conference at one of these congregate shelters and were turned away, so that by doing that we would show what those conditions are like, where you're essentially taken from your community and into a congregate shelter where you're limited to how you go about your day. You're constantly under the scrutiny of coordinators and security, and being able to leave and come back is a daily challenge. And children are impacted the most by alcohol and addiction. That's been something that our leadership have tried to communicate, where in previous years we've seen that the evacuation had brought in new drugs into our community, and only now learning that this evacuation, there's more drugs coming in, and our young people, particularly our women and girls, being targeted by predators. So those are always concerns that are in the back of our minds as leaders when we're trying to look after the health and safety of each while they're evacuated. So I think that kind of amplified the level of stress for our leadership, of that constant worry. And once learned that they were able to come home was a big relief. And being able to now plan to try and monitor and search for contraband was something that we've been working hard at with our partners to try and mitigate and deter contraband from being transported by our evacuees back to the community. So it's becoming an issue that not only affects First Nations communities, but all Manitobans and Canadians. Addictions and alcoholism is a big problem.
Mm-hmm. We've been seeing wildfires every summer for the past several years, but here in Manitoba, it's been the worst on record in 30 years. And I'm wondering if this is going to continue happening every summer. What do you think needs to change about, how Manitoba, how Canada, how everyone is approaching wildfires?
This is something that we've been asking for from government, is that we be at the forefront with the planning, so that we're able to hopefully hold accountable the governments that make these decisions on where resources are to be spent. Because obviously government isn't prioritizing our communities in the north, and First Nation communities in particular, about spending money to protect our people. So we need to be at that table to ensure that there is accountability and transparency with government, and that the resources that are being allocated to certain areas, that we're there to ensure that we are not neglected, and that we're not simply passed and as a group of people that aren't really a priority for government. So that is something that we're looking to hopefully change by being at that table, and then being able to direct resources to prevention. Maybe having our own emergency measures operation here for our region, and in other communities in Manitoba and Canada, where they make the decisions as far as what resources are needed, whether it's water bombers, firefighters, training, making sure that that's all in place for our communities. So we'd like to be able to have that conversation with government, and being able to hopefully foster a good partnership in the future of our communities and the protection of our communities.
Grand Chief McDougall, that's all the time we have today, but thank you so much for making the time for this really meaningful and necessary conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Alex McDougall is the Grand Chief of Anisininew, Okimawin. He joined us from Garden Hill First Nation in northern Manitoba. InFocus also invited Indigenous Services Canada Minister McDougall to join us to talk about future fires, but she wasn't available. And that's all for today. Join me next week as I sit down with veteran journalist Kathleen Martins as she highlights some of the top moments of her 35-year career.
And there we are, knee-deep at the dump, and many people come every day. They don't have hardware stores in Nunavut, and so they come and forage at the dump for anything they might need that someone else has thrown away, something for their satellite dish, something for their ATV, something to plug a hole in their window, and they come and they get food. And when the food is dumped, someone puts it on Facebook, and it's just like ants on a hill. Everybody comes and takes what they can. And the store became aware of it and they'd run a knife through a huge bag of flour, and then all the flour would pour out so that someone couldn't take the bag of flour because they didn't want people shopping at the dump, right?
Today's episode was produced by Mark Blackburn and edited by Jesse Andrushko. Charmaine Straker is the executive producer of APTN News InFocus. If you're liking the show, please leave a review. If you have any comments or ideas, email them to infocus@aptn.ca. For more APTN News podcasts, visit aptnnews.ca or find us on your favorite player. I'm Cierra Bettens. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Hi, I'm Dennis Ward, one of the hosts of APTN National News. We've expanded our Truth and Politics panel into a weekly podcast. Each episode, panelists Jennifer Leywitz and Negon Sinclair join us to examine key issues affecting Indigenous peoples across Canada. Listen and subscribe on your favorite podcast player.